The hum of the supermarket floor was drowned out by the sound of a stomach growl. It didn't come from one of the shoppers rushing through aisles with carts stacked high, it came from behind the counter. A young cashier, her face pale with exhaustion, tightened her apron and forced a smile at the next customer. Her eyes darted toward the small staff room door at the back, where a tiny lunch bag sat unopened. For the third day in a row, she would go without food, saving every bite for her baby at home. What no one realized, not her coworkers, not the impatient customers, not even her own manager, was that someone important was watching. Someone she thought was just another customer, standing in line with nothing more than a few items and a quiet gaze. What she could never imagine was that the man studying her so carefully was the CEO of the very company she worked for, disguised in plain clothes, here to see how his stores truly operated. Before we dive deeper into this powerful and emotional journey, let me ask you, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, in stories that remind us of the hidden battles people fight every single day, then please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need hope today, and subscribe to our channel, Stories Collection. Together, we can spread compassion one story at a time. The Undercover CEO, James Porter, had built his empire from the ground up, but success had distanced him from the reality of his employees. He'd been told countless times that his stores ran smoothly, that workers were happy, that policies were fair. But James had grown skeptical. He wanted to see with his own eyes, not through polished reports prepared by executives who lived far from the struggles of the minimum wage workers who kept his business alive. So, wearing a simple jacket and jeans, he spent his mornings blending in with shoppers, moving unnoticed through aisles, pretending to compare cereal prices while observing the people who greeted hundreds of strangers every day. It was on a gray Tuesday afternoon that his eyes first lingered on her, Emily. She was no older than 24, her hands trembling slightly as she scanned items, her lips pale, her frame thinner than it should have been. When her coworker mentioned a lunch break, Emily shook her head softly, saying she wasn't hungry. James noticed the way her voice cracked, how her eyes flickered with guilt, almost as if she was lying not to others but to herself. He'd seen employees skip meals before, but something about her seemed different, there was pain hidden behind her tired smile. Over the next days, James returned to that same store. Each time, he watched Emily repeat the same routine. She would work tirelessly, greet every customer with warmth, and when the clock struck lunch, she would quietly excuse herself, sit in the corner of the break room, and carefully open a small container. But she never ate. Instead, James realized with a sinking feeling, she was dividing her food into smaller portions, sealing it tightly, and tucking it away. Later, through hushed words on a phone call, he overheard her whispering to someone, "I'll be home soon, baby. Mommy saved you lunch." That moment hit James harder than he expected. In all his years of business, in all his board meetings about profit margins and efficiency, he had forgotten what true sacrifice looked like. Here was a mother, silently battling hunger so her child wouldn't feel it. James began to dig deeper. Disguised still as a customer, he struck casual conversations with other staff. From them, he learned bits and pieces of Emily's story. She was a single mother. Her partner had abandoned her when their daughter was only a few months old. With no family nearby and rent overdue, Emily worked every extra shift she could get, but still barely managed to cover bills. Baby formula alone took half her paycheck, leaving her to ration her own meals. And yet, she never complained, never let bitterness spill into her voice. She carried herself with quiet strength, even as her body grew weaker. The story stirred something deep inside James. He remembered his own childhood, raised by a mother who had worked double shifts at a diner, often going to bed hungry so he could eat. He remembered watching her scrub floors late into the night, her body exhausted but her eyes full of love. Emily reminded him of her, and he felt an ache he hadn't felt in years. But James also wrestled with a decision. He couldn't just walk up and reveal who he was. He needed to see not only Emily's reality but the store's culture. Were managers ignoring the struggles of their workers? Were policies trapping employees in cycles of poverty? The more he watched, the more he realized the truth: no one was helping her. One evening, James followed discreetly as Emily left the store. He saw her board an old bus, her head leaning against the window, exhaustion pulling her eyelids shut. When she finally stepped off, it was at a rundown apartment complex with peeling paint and flickering lights. From his car, James watched her climb the stairs, clutching that small food container close to her chest. A few minutes later, through the thin window, he saw her greet a little girl with wild curls and bright eyes. The moment Emily placed the food in front of her daughter, the child's face lit up with joy. Emily watched her eat with a tender smile, her own hunger hidden behind eyes full of love. The scene broke him. James sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, his own throat tightening. For all the wealth he had accumulated, for all the awards and success he had been praised for, he realized he had drifted far from the very people his company claimed to serve. That night, he made a decision. In the days that followed, James began preparing something quietly, carefully. He worked with a small trusted team to draft new employee support programs, meal assistance for single parents, childcare vouchers, and pathways for promotions. But beyond policies, he wanted to do something personal for Emily. The day came when James finally revealed himself. Emily had just finished another long shift when the manager called her into the office. Nervous, clutching her apron, she stepped in, only to see the man she thought was just a regular customer standing there in a suit. He looked different now, but the kindness in his eyes was the same. Her confusion deepened as he introduced himself, James Porter, CEO of the company. For a moment, she thought it was some cruel joke. But then he told her everything, that he had been in the store, that he had seen her sacrifice, that he knew about her skipping meals to feed her baby. Emily's eyes welled with tears, her pride warring with her vulnerability. She wanted to deny it, to hide her struggle, but James gently assured her she didn't need to hide anymore. He offered her a full-time position with benefits, doubled her salary, and enrolled her in a new program for single parents. More than that, he handed her a check, a personal gift to cover her overdue rent and provide stability for the months ahead. For the first time in years, Emily let herself cry freely, her hands trembling as she whispered thank you over and over. But James stopped her. He told her she wasn't receiving charity, she was receiving what she deserved for her strength, her dedication, her sacrifice. He told her that she had reminded him of something priceless, that true greatness wasn't measured in profits but in compassion. From that day forward, Emily's life changed. She no longer skipped meals, she and her daughter shared dinners filled with laughter. She walked into work with her head held higher, not just because her circumstances improved, but because she finally felt seen. In James, he carried her story into every boardroom, reminding his executives that behind every paycheck was a human soul, a story, a sacrifice. If this story touched your heart, please, don't just watch and move on. Take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel, Stories Collection. Stories like these remind us that kindness still exists, that second chances can change everything, and that even the smallest acts of compassion can ripple across lives in ways we may never fully see. Before we end, let me ask you one special request. Comment below, do you believe one act of kindness can change a life forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Emily's story didn't begin at that supermarket register, it began years earlier, when she was just 19 and still full of dreams. She had wanted to become a nurse, someone who could heal others, someone her late mother would have been proud of. But life had other plans. Falling in love too young, trusting a man who promised forever but disappeared when responsibility arrived, she was left with a baby in her arms and bills piling up faster than her courage could hold them. Nights were long and cold, spent rocking her daughter to sleep in a tiny apartment, listening to the muffled sounds of neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls. And in the morning, she would wake up before dawn, pack her child's bag, and drop her off at a neighbor's house so she could clock in for her shift. What haunted Emily wasn't her exhaustion, it was the gnawing fear of failing her child. Every skipped meal was a choice, every extra shift was a sacrifice, every tear shed in silence was a vow that her daughter would never feel the emptiness she herself carried. James saw fragments of this story without ever asking. He saw it in her weary eyes, in the way she walked with a slight slouch as though the world weighed down on her, in the way she smiled for customers even when her own spirit was breaking. It was a smile he recognized, the same one his mother used to wear when she told him, "Everything's fine," while serving him the last piece of bread on the table. That memory haunted him now, clearer than it had been in decades. The more James watched, the more conflicted he became. He wasn't just an observer anymore, he was a witness to suffering, and with that came responsibility. Each night he returned home to his luxury penthouse, his fridge stocked with gourmet meals, and he couldn't shake the image of Emily's daughter eating the tiny portions her mother saved. He found himself pacing in his living room, staring out at the glittering city skyline, asking himself if all his success meant anything if the people who made his company thrive were struggling like this. His board meetings echoed in his head. Charts, numbers, profit margins. No one ever spoke of hunger, of exhaustion, of the silent battles fought by cashiers, stock clerks, and janitors. He realized then that wealth had insulated him, creating a distance between his world and theirs. And yet, wasn't it his responsibility to close that gap? The breaking point came on a rainy evening. James once again followed Emily's bus home, the downpour blurring the windows of his car. He watched as she stepped off, her coat thin against the cold, her shoes soaked through. Still, she carried herself with determination, her hands shielding the small food container as though it were treasure. Through the window of her apartment, James saw her daughter run to her, tiny arms wrapping tightly around Emily's legs. He watched as Emily wiped rain from her face, her exhaustion melting into pure love as she handed her child the meal. And then, when the little girl wasn't looking, James saw Emily sit quietly at the table, sipping only water, pretending she wasn't hungry. That night, James couldn't sleep. He remembered his mother collapsing once from exhaustion, fainting at work because she hadn't eaten. He remembered the shame of poverty, the ache of helplessness, the silent prayers whispered into pillows. Emily was reliving his past, and he couldn't stand by any longer. The very next morning, James called a private meeting with his most trusted advisors. He revealed nothing about Emily specifically but spoke of the bigger picture, the need for change, for humanity in business. His team was stunned when he proposed sweeping reforms, meal assistance programs, childcare support, emergency funds for employees in crisis. "We can't build an empire on empty stomachs," he told them firmly. "If we take care of our people, they'll take care of our company. It's not charity, it's justice." But beyond policy, James carried something heavier in his heart, a personal mission. He wanted to show Emily that her sacrifices were seen, her struggle mattered. So, he arranged for the store manager to call her into the office, a meeting she walked into with trembling hands, fearing the worst. When James turned in his chair, dressed now in the suit that reflected his true position, Emily froze. Her breath caught in her throat. Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed by confusion. She stammered, asking if this was a mistake. But James smiled gently, assuring her it wasn't. He told her everything, how he had been watching, how he had seen her strength, how her sacrifices had opened his eyes. As he spoke, Emily's tears spilled freely. She covered her face, ashamed of her vulnerability, but James leaned forward and told her, "You don't have to hide your struggle. You are stronger than you know. And you deserve better." What followed was a moment Emily would never forget. James offered her not only a new position with benefits and double her pay but also a scholarship fund, so that when she was ready, she could return to school and chase her dream of nursing. He handed her a check to cover her debts and secure her daughter's future. And with a voice thick with emotion, he thanked her, for reminding him what true resilience looked like. From that day on, Emily's life began to transform. She no longer skipped meals, no longer feared eviction, no longer carried her burdens in silence. Her daughter grew up knowing not hunger, but love and laughter. And James carried Emily's story into every decision he made as CEO, ensuring that no worker would ever be invisible again. This story reminds us all of something powerful. Behind every smile at a cash register, behind every tired face stocking shelves, there are stories of sacrifice, of love, of survival. Sometimes, all it takes is someone willing to see. If this story touched your heart, I ask you from the bottom of mine, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Stories Collection. By spreading stories like Emily's, we remind the world that kindness can change lives. And before we close, I have one special request. Please comment below, what does kindness mean to you? Your words might inspire someone else who needs it today.